Elara Thorne had always known the land would shape her fate, etched it into the very lines on her palms. But nothing in her past could have prepared her for the day the wind shifted, carrying with it a faint, unsettling murmur that spoke of a world unraveling. She lived in Sunstone Valley, a name that mocked its current state, a place where the relentless sun scorched the very soul of the earth, and hope often felt as distant as the next rainfall. Years, relentless and unforgiving, had passed since the last true deluge, leaving the land bleached and parched, transforming once vibrant fields into a vast, desolate patchwork of cracked, sun-baked earth and whispering dust. A small ranch, a collection of weathered timber and faded paint, clung stubbornly to the valley's dusty edge. A silent testament to a life that had slowly, relentlessly, dwindled. Every sagging fence post, every creaking board of the barn, seemed to echo the quiet erosion of her spirit since her husband, Thomas, had been taken by the fever 5 long, desolate years ago. She walked its barren acres like a ghost haunting her own past, a solitary figure cast against the vast, indifferent canvas of the sky. Her grief, a heavy, impenetrable shawl wrapped around her shoulders, keeping the world and any lingering warmth firmly out. Twice a month, a pilgrimage more than a journey. Elara would make the arduous trek into Dust Devil, the nearest semblance of a town. It was less a bustling community and more a grim collection of sun-baked shacks clustered haphazardly around a single dusty main street, a place where people haggled for necessities with worn coins and traded whispers that rarely offered comfort or kindness. Her visits were always brief, always functional, dictated by the bare minimum her isolated existence required. She didn't seek company, didn't linger for the strained pleasantries of gossip or the hollow comfort of shared meals. For what was there to say, when every potential conversation felt like an inventory of losses, a tally of all that had been stripped away this particular day? Her old mare, a creature as stoic and weary as the land itself, trudged into the square, her hooves kicking up plumes of fine, red dust that coated everything in a suffocating shroud. Elara hadn't planned to stop for anything beyond her usual meager supplies. Her larder was sparse, a reflection of a life pared down to its starkest essentials. Her needs, even sparser: bread, nails, maybe a few yards of cheap muslin. Nothing she truly craved, nothing that filled the void where purpose once lay, not in the way one needed things for a bustling, hopeful home or a vibrant shared future. Yet, as the mare finally halted, something shifted within Elara. Perhaps it was the way the wind, usually a dry, rasping whisper, carried a faint, unsettling murmur from the very center of town, a sound unlike the usual cacophony of commerce, a curiosity as fleeting and persistent as a desert mirage, drew her wagon slowly towards a growing crowd. An invisible thread, spun from something ancient and undeniable, pulling her forward against her will. Then she saw them. 3 boys, standing unnaturally still beside a crudely painted sign that seemed to mock the very idea of humanity. Their heads were obscured by grotesque burlap sacks, tied tight like macabre masks, the rough fabric cutting cruelly into their small, fragile necks, their hands bound painfully behind their backs, forced their shoulders into unnatural, contorted angles, a silent testament to their captivity. The sign itself, stark and chilling against the weathered wood of the post, declared their horrifying status. Orphans, $3 apiece. That was all. No names, no ages. A collective gasp seemed to catch in Elara's own throat, a response so visceral, so raw, that it pierced through the thick hide of her own carefully cultivated indifference. shaking her to her core. The auctioneer, a corpulent man whose voice was as coarse as the rough suspenders straining over his belly, cleared his throat, his eyes scanning the indifferent, almost bored faces of the onlookers. He called out, his voice a sales pitch devoid of humanity. "Ma'am, you here for one?" Elara didn't answer. Her boots, usually striking the dirt with a decisive purpose, now felt impossibly heavy. Each slow, deliberate step carrying the unexpected weight of an unbidden realization, a recognition of something long buried within her. No one noticed her at first. She was, after all, just a quiet widow from the valley, easily overlooked, a shadow among the dust-choked throngs. But as she drew closer, her gaze, typically downcast and withdrawn, locked onto the horrifying scene before her. Her eyes, usually clouded with quiet sorrow, now held a fierce, cold fire, ancient and formidable, that made the heads in the crowd slowly, almost reluctantly, turn. They looked, not because she looked strange, but because her spirit, long dormant under layers of grief, had suddenly, fiercely, ignited, burning away the veil of apathy that had shrouded her for what felt like an eternity. One of the boys swayed, the tallest, perhaps 15 years old, his body taut with a rigid, silent defiance that belied his desperate situation. He was Orin, she would later learn, and she imagined his pale blue eyes, when revealed, would be too wide for his gaunt face, brimming with a stark, cold assessment of the cruel world around him. He buckled slightly at the knees, a momentary weakness, but quickly caught himself. A silent, stubborn refusal to yield, a flicker of untamed spirit even under the humiliating sack. The other two remained motionless, ghostly figures in their burlap shrouds, their absolute silence a chilling testament to untold hardship and a quiet despair. The auctioneer, clearly unnerved by Elara's unwavering, almost spectral stare, reiterated, his voice a nervous bark. $3 each. Farmer up north said he might use him for sheep herding. These boys ain't house-trained. Ma'am, don't talk much. Don't cry either. Haven't eaten today. Been like that since sunrise. Orders from the cellar, don't untie the sacks. Could be mute, could be worse. His awkward, forced chuckle attempted to mask the unsettling, undeniable truth of what he was doing. You just don't know what you're buying, is all I'm saying. He gestured vaguely at the boy, as if pointing out a minor defect in a piece of worthless livestock. Oblivious to the fierce protectiveness stirring in Elara's soul, the words grated against Elara's very being, each syllable a harsh chisel against the fragile wall she had built around her heart. These weren't animals to be broken, to be bought and sold, but children, living, breathing, vulnerable children, stripped of their names, their identities, their very humanity. A wave of righteous fury, cold and clear, washed over her, a feeling so potent it made her hands tremble. She reached into her coat, her fingers fumbling for the worn leather purse she always carried. Inside, nestled among a few tarnished silver dollars, was a single folded scrap of paper, so old it felt delicate, redolent with the faint, comforting scent of lavender and dust, a precious relic from a life she had thought irrevocably lost, a whisper of a time when her home was filled with warmth and laughter, not just dust and echoes. With a movement as decisive and final as a gunshot echoing across the valley, she pressed 6 silver dollars into the auctioneer's sweaty, grasping palm. The coins clinked against his skin, a sharp, metallic sound in the sudden, absolute silence of the square. "All 3, she stated, her voice, though quiet, carrying an undeniable force, a steely resolve that silenced the last, lingering murmurs of the stunned crowd. "Untie them," The man blinked, incredulous, his eyes darting nervously between the coins in his hand and the stern, unyielding gaze of Elara, a woman who had clearly, unexpectedly, gone mad. He swallowed hard, a visible gulp, then hesitated, his body frozen under the collective eyes of the entire town fixed on him. With a muttered curse, barely audible, he drew a glinting knife, its blade catching the harsh sunlight, and with rough, quick movements, cut the ropes binding each sack. The coarse fabric fell away, revealing the faces of the three boys, like blossoming flowers, finally freed from tight, suffocating buds. Orrin, the oldest, stood with jaw clenched, not flinching, his eyes, now uncovered, scanning the faces in the crowd with a fierce, cold intensity. A warrior's assessment of a battlefield. The middle one, Cody, perhaps 10, had a fresh, angry bruise under one eye and a scab on his lip, testimony to recent violence. His eyes darted nervously, refusing to focus on any single face, like a trapped bird desperately searching for an impossible escape. The smallest, no more than 6, an innocent in a world too harsh, stared straight at Elara. His gaze, unblinking and utterly certain, seemed to see past her worn black dress and into the very depths of her being. A gaze of pure, innocent, astonishing recognition. Then, barely a whisper, a sound so delicate it might have been carried on the dry wind. Yet, it cut through the silence of the dusty square like a pure, clear note, echoing in Elara's very soul. He spoke. Elara Thorne. The name, her name, hung in the shocked air, a collective breath held by the entire town. A ripple of bewildered rustle swept through the onlookers, a woman coughing to nervously break the profound spell. "How does he know her?" someone muttered, their voice laced with a mixture of suspicion, awe, and outright disbelief. Elara didn't answer. She simply stepped forward, her movement purposeful, a hand resting gently, yet with undeniable promise, on little Pip's shoulder, then Cody's, then Orrin's. Her touch was light, yet firm, a silent vow in a world of broken promises. "Come with me," she said, her voice steady, unwavering, holding the quiet power of a true command. The auctioneer, still reeling from the unexpected turn of events, called after her, his voice frantic, a desperate plea to cling to the last vestiges of his broken authority. "You don't even know their names." But Elara didn't stop. She didn't need their names. She just needed them to live. She just needed them. As they rode back towards Sunstone Valley, the sun beginning its slow descent, painting the vast sky in fiery hues of orange and purple, the boys sat silently in the back of the wagon, clutching their knees, their eyes fixed on the winding road ahead. A new, fragile chapter was beginning, not just for them, the lost and the found, but for Elara Thorne. Under the vast, indifferent, yet now somehow hopeful sky, the journey home, for the first time in years, did not feel empty. The ride back to Sunstone Valley passed in a profound, almost sacred silence, each mile swallowed by the vast, indifferent landscape. Elara Thorne's mind, usually a quiet sanctuary of methodical thought, now wrestled with the sheer enormity of her spontaneous choice in Dust Devil. It was an act born not of logic, but of a deep, primal stir in her soul she hadn't felt since Thomas died. Behind her, Orrin, Cody, and little Pip sat huddled together, small bundles of raw nerves and ingrained trauma. Their eyes, now visible and too wide, darted about, taking in the endless open land with a mixture of fear, bewildered curiosity, and a fragile, nascent hope. Elara offered no immediate comfort, no platitudes of reassurance. She knew. with an instinct honed by years of solitary survival and observation. That solace offered too quickly, too eagerly, could feel like a trap. It often scared away those who had been hurt the deepest, those whose trust had been shattered too many times to mend with simple words. What they needed now was not empty promises, but the quiet, unwavering promise of safety, a silent, steady space where they could simply exist without threat, where they could truly breathe for perhaps the first time in their young, tumultuous lives. Her ranch, a solitary sentinel perched precariously on the valley's dusty edge, slowly materialized through the heat haze, its familiar silhouette a comfort in its very dilapidation. It was a stark place, where the tall pines grew denser and darker, standing like silent sentinels, and the creek, fed by distant, unseen springs, ran faster, its distant murmur a lonely sound in the stillness of the afternoon. The fields, once Thomas's pride and the vibrant heart of their shared dreams, had long since gone to seed, a tangled mess of dry stalks and forgotten promise, mirroring the desolation she had felt within her own spirit. The barn leaned precariously to one side, its weathered timbers groaning in the ceaseless wind, and the windows of the small cabin hadn't seen a scrub brush in months, perpetually veiled by a thin film of fine, red dust. Yet, despite its neglect, it stood, and it was hers. And now, in a way she couldn't yet articulate, a way that felt both terrifying and undeniably right, it was theirs. When Elara finally reined in the mare before the porch, the boys didn't move, rooted to their spots in the wagon bed as if held captive by invisible chains. "Inside," she said, her voice softer than it had been in years. A gentle invitation, yet firm enough to carry the weight of a quiet command. Orrin was the first to stir, a flicker of decision in his eyes, with a quiet grace that belied his young age and recent ordeal. He jumped down, then instinctively reached back, helping Cody and Pip descend, all without a single word exchanged between them. They followed Elara into the house like shadows, their footsteps quiet, almost imperceptible, their breathing still too shallow, too tight, betraying the lingering fear that clung to them like the very dust of the road. Inside, the cabin was blessedly cool and dim, offering a welcome respite from the relentless sun. It held the faint, lingering warmth from the morning's stove fire, a comforting presence. Elara moved with quiet efficiency, her movements practiced and deliberate, a rhythm honed by years of self-sufficiency. She set a kettle on the cast-iron stove, its low, comforting hum a gentle counterpoint to the boys' apprehension. From a cupboard, one smoothed by countless openings, she pulled down a jar of dried beans and a sack of flour, the simple ingredients promising a meal, a tangible sign of basic sustenance after days of hunger. "Sit," she instructed, her voice devoid of demand, simply stating a fact, an invitation to a semblance of normalcy. They obeyed instantly, their movements stiff, like puppets with newly cut strings, still expecting the snap of a whip or a harsh word for any deviation. Elara stirred batter for pancakes with one hand, her gaze, calm and steady, taking them in, observing every flinch, every subtle shift in their posture, every guarded glance. She didn't rush them, didn't press for answers, didn't demand explanations or expressions of gratitude. The silence in the room was thick, yet it wasn't empty. It was a burgeoning space for healing, for tentative new beginnings, for the tender unfurling of broken spirits. She knew that trust, like a stubborn seed planted in dry earth, would need time, patience, and unwavering care to truly sprout and take root. Breaking the profound quiet, Elara finally asked, her voice gentle, almost a whisper. Its softness, a stark contrast to the harshness they'd known. "What's your name?" The question, soft and unassuming, was directed at the smallest boy. "Pip." He hesitated, his eyes wide and uncertain, flickering towards his brothers for reassurance, before murmuring, "Pip." She nodded, a small, encouraging gesture that conveyed more than words, a silent acceptance. "Yours?" Cody, the middle boy, looked down at his scuffed boots, then slowly up at her, a flicker of something resembling curiosity, perhaps even a nascent hope, in his eyes. "Cody," he replied, his voice barely audible, as if the sound of his own name might somehow shatter the fragile peace that had tentatively settled around them. Orrin, the eldest, regarded her for a long moment, his gaze assessing, searching for any hint of a trick, any hidden agenda, any false promise. Before he spoke, his voice low and raspy, a sound of disuse. "Orrin." Elara placed the pan on the stove, the sizzle of batter filling the small space with a comforting, domestic sound. "I'm Elara," she said, her hands moving expertly, flipping the first golden pancake with a practiced flick of her wrist. "You said my name. Pip. How would you know it?" He shrugged, a small, unconscious gesture, his eyes round with a simple, disarming truth. "Just knew. A lady told me when I was sleeping. Said, Elara Thorne will come. She'll take you home." The words hung in the air, a peculiar revelation, a thread of the inexplicable weaving its way into their harsh reality. Orrin stiffened visibly at the mention, his shoulders tightening, a clear reaction to the echoes of a past he desperately wanted to forget. While Cody glanced nervously at the floor, perhaps sharing a similar, unspoken memory that tightened his own small frame. Elara didn't move. A strange sense of something beyond coincidence, something akin to destiny, settling over her, chill in her spine even as it warmed her heart. "What lady?" she asked, her voice barely a breath, her heart quickening with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Pip scratched at his wrist, a nervous habit that spoke volumes of past anxieties and unexpressed fears. "Didn't say her name, but she was kind and warm, like you." The room fell silent again, but this time it was a different kind of quiet, a quiet imbued with a hint of magic, a whisper of prophecy, a burgeoning sense of fate, tying them together in a way none of them yet fully understood. The quiet, however, could only hold for so long against the weight of their past. It was finally broken by Orrin. He stood, his lean frame taut with a coiled tension, a powerful defense mechanism born of too many hard lessons learned in a brutal world. "I don't care how he knew your name," he said, his voice raw, edged with a long-held fear, a desperate challenge flung at a world that had always betrayed him. "But if you're going to hurt us, do it quick. Don't drag it out." His words, blunt and brutal, were a window into the deep-seated trauma that plagued him, a raw plea for an end to prolonged suffering, for swiftness over drawn-out pain. Elara turned, her brow furrowing slightly with concern, her gaze direct, unwavering, meeting his fierce stare with a quiet, unyielding resolve. "I won't hurt you," she stated, her voice calm and firm, a steady anchor in the storm of his past. A stark contrast to the harshness he had known from every other adult. Orrin's eyes, devoid of hope, replied, "They all say that." Elara, without missing a beat, flipped a pancake with a practiced flick of her wrist, the sizzling sound a mundane counterpoint to the heavy words. "Well," she said, her voice unwavering, a quiet promise echoing in the small cabin. "I won't say it again." She fed them until their plates were clean. until their small bellies were full for perhaps the first time in memory. The simple act of nourishment, a powerful, unspoken form of care and comfort. They ate like wolves, silently, ravenously, their hunger a primal force. The only sounds the soft scrape of forks and the gentle clink of mugs against the worn table. When the plates were empty, she brought out soft woolen blankets, thick and comforting, their warmth a tangible reassurance, laying them near the crackling hearth. "You sleep here tonight," she told them, her voice a soothing balm against their long-held anxieties. "Clean clothes are in the chest. If you run, I won't come after you, but I'll leave the lantern on until morning." She turned, stepping towards the stairs, then paused, her voice softer still, a whisper meant for the quiet of the room, a profound honesty. "Tomorrow," she murmured, "we'll talk about what happens next." But they didn't sleep. Not truly. Not deeply. Not with the lingering shadows of their past. And neither did she. Pip's peculiar words replayed in her mind, over and over. Words she had whispered in the cold soil beside Thomas's grave, years ago. Words she'd never told anyone. Not even the Lord. "Let someone need me again. Let someone say my name." And now a boy, a lost child, had. And 3 lives. Perhaps 4 were about to change forever. Woven together by a thread of shared destiny, fear, and a burgeoning, unexpected love. Morning arrived without ceremony, the clouds hanging low and grey. Elara was up at the rooster's crow, dressed, downstairs, starting the fire. The boys hadn't moved much. Pip was curled nearest the hearth, Cody rigid on his back, Orrin watchful in the corner. None spoke. Elara prepared washwater and soap. She knew they were hungry, knew they were dirty. She didn't crowd them. When she laid out clean clothes, her voice was calm and firm. "You can wash in the barn. Orrin, you go first. Then Cody, Pip, you're last. Don't come back in until you're clean." Orrin's jaw tightened. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I want to," she replied. "People don't do things just to be kind. That's because people forget how much kindness can cost," Elara said softly. He didn't answer, but a minute later, he slowly took the clothes and disappeared. A tiny crack in his armor. By the time Cody had followed, Elara was mixing oats, slicing apples, and adding saved cinnamon. Pip lingered in the doorway. "Can I keep my name?" he whispered. "Why wouldn't you?" Elara asked. He looked down. "People change them if they take you in." "I won't," she said firmly. "Good," he whispered, "'cause I think God gave it to me." A warmth spread in Elara's chest. "You warm enough?" He nodded. "Go on. Then?" He trotted barefoot toward the barn. The sky lightened as they washed. Orrin returned last, hair damp, shirt too big, but clean. He stood stiffly. "I'll do chores," he offered. "You don't need to." "I want to." That changed things. Elara showed him the tool shed, the chicken coop, the neglected garden. Orrin nodded, got to work. She sent Cody to stack firewood. Pip, a curious shadow, helped Elara fold linens and collect dishes. It wasn't perfect. Awkward silences, sudden flinches. Pip dropped a plate. Cody wouldn't meet her eyes. Orrin didn't come for lunch, but by sunset, a warmth filled the house, a quiet hum of returning life. Then, a knock. 3 sharp raps. Elara froze. The boys tensed. She opened the door to Reverend Silas Blackwood, tall and lean. "Afternoon. Elara," he said, "heard you made a purchase in town." Elara stepped outside. "I brought them home." The Reverend sighed. "Wasn't sure it was you. Some thought you'd gone mad." Taken to bringing home strays? Maybe I have, Elara admitted. They're not livestock, Silas. I know. They've been passed between more homes than many strays. Orin, I heard he broke a man's nose with a rock. Elara met his gaze. He won't be breaking mine. Reverend Blackwood looked at her, then sighed. You want me to help get their names written? Make it official. Elara shook her head. Not yet. I need to know they'll stay. I wouldn't count on that. Not with their history. Elara looked at the hills, then back. Then I'll make new history. He smiled faintly. You always were stubborn. I learned from the best. He tipped his hat. Elara, I hope you know what you're doing. Taking in one boy is hard enough. 3? That's a resurrection. She didn't reply. Inside, Pip peeked. Who was that? Just someone who worries too much, Elara said. He's scared. Elara, Pip said, scared of what might happen to us. Elara looked at the older boys. So am I, she murmured. That night, she pulled out an old Bible. The boys watched. I read from this when I was your age, she said. Sometimes it helped. Sometimes it didn't. But I thought maybe you'd want to hear something from it tonight. They didn't answer. So she read, He setteth the solitary in families. He bringeth out those which are bound with chains. She didn't look up, just turned the page. By the time she closed it, Pip was asleep. Cody was curled up. Orin, though his eyes were open, wasn't watching the door anymore. He was watching her. Elara blew out the lantern. For the first time in years, the silence of the house didn't feel empty. It felt full. It felt like home. Life at the Thorne Ranch had slowly, tentatively, begun to settle into a rhythm. Elara Thorne found a fragile peace in the mundane, the steady cycle of sunrises and sunsets painting the Sunstone Valley with hues of quiet hope. The boys, too, were finding their footing. Pip's laughter, once a rare, startled sound, now echoed more freely through the cabin, especially when Cody, with his quiet humor, would make exaggerated faces or mimic the grumpy old rooster. Orin, though still guarded, devoted himself to the ranch with a fierce dedication. His hands, once accustomed to suffering, now learning the satisfying ache of honest work. He'd meticulously repair a hinge on the barn door with a nail he'd found, a small, practical miracle born of necessity. And when Elara asked who showed him how, he'd simply shrug. You did, he'd say. When you fixed the gate latch, said. These small moments, almost imperceptible shifts in their cautious existence, spoke volumes of trust slowly blooming in the parched earth of their lives. Cody, in his own thoughtful way, began to spend hours in the small, fledgling garden Elara had started. He handled the seeds and young shoots with a gentle reverence, as if they were fragile glass, murmuring to them as he carefully turned the soil. One afternoon, he unearthed a fat, red worm. Instead of recoiling, he picked it up gently, setting it aside before continuing his digging. Did you ever have a family? He asked suddenly, his voice soft, breaking a long silence. Elara paused, her own hands in the dirt, the question stirring old aches. I did, she replied, her voice a distant echo of her past. Where are they now? Gone? He didn't press, didn't pry into the wound that still ached within her. Just nodded, understanding more than she expected from one so young. Cody, she realized, asked questions not to wound, but because he was trying to map the harsh landscape of loss, to see how much of it a person might survive. Inside, Pip, with his boundless energy, would sweep the cabin floor, not because anyone told him to, but because he liked the neat lines his broom made. He'd hum softly to himself. Old hymns without full verses, just fragments he remembered from some forgotten time. A tiny melody of resilience in the quiet house. "This little light of mine," he'd murmur again and again, unaware that Elara, baking bread, could hear his earnest, innocent song. And sometimes she found herself humming the same tune. 3 days turned into 4, then a week, each passing day weaving them tighter into the fabric of a new, unexpected family. Cody started reading aloud by the fire in the evenings, stumbling over long words, but Pip would always clap anyway, his small hands a flurry of enthusiastic encouragement. The awkward silences between them began to lessen, replaced by a quiet understanding, a comfort that didn't need words. They ate in a companionable quiet now, the clink of mugs and the scrape of forks against plates, a soothing symphony of domesticity. Elara found herself watching them longer than she meant to, a warmth blossoming in her chest that felt foreign, yet deeply comforting, dispelling years of icy solitude. "Why are you looking at us like that?" Orrin asked one evening, a biscuit halfway to his mouth, his watchful gaze catching hers. "I'm just proud," she said, her voice quieter than she intended, yet undeniably true. A simple declaration holding immense weight. The boys paused, their expressions unreadable, until Pip reached out, his tiny hand finding hers on the table. He didn't say anything, just held it, a simple, profound gesture that spoke volumes of budding affection. But peace, like all things delicate and precious in the wild, never lasted forever in places like Sunstone Valley. The first ominous whisper came in the form of a letter, slipped into the crack of the front door late one night. It had no name, no return address, just folded parchment written in careful, almost ornate penmanship. Elara found it when she stepped out with a lamp, the oil burning low, the crisp night air suddenly heavy with unspoken threat. "You stole them? That won't be forgotten." Her heart tightened, a cold knot forming in her stomach. The words, though vague, carried the weight of a menacing promise. She burned the letter in the fireplace, watching the sinister message curl into ash, and didn't tell the boys, not wanting to disturb the fragile peace they were painstakingly building. The second warning came 2 weeks later, more brutal, less ambiguous. A chicken was missing from the coop, its feathers scattered near the fence line, a stark reminder of vulnerability. Then, a few days after that, Orrin found one of their new goats dead, its neck snapped with brutal precision, left without any signs of struggle. Just a silent, chilling message etched in blood and stillness. They buried it near the garden, the earth cold and unforgiving. "I think it was wolves," Cody suggested, his voice tight with fear. Orrin shook his head, his gaze hardened beyond his ears, a grim knowing in his eyes. "Wolves don't snap necks and leave the body untouched. Someone's sending a message." Elara didn't argue. She just started locking the cabin door with a heavy bar and kept the old rifle loaded, leaning against the mantel, ready for instant use. Her days became a constant vigilance, her nights filled with the creaks of the old house and the imagined whispers of an unseen threat. Orrin's birthday came with storm clouds gathering low over the valley, thunder rumbling, trembling the window panes like distant cannon fire. They lit the cabin with every candle they could find, their soft, flickering glow casting dancing shadows on the walls, trying to defy the gloom outside. Pip, with immense pride, gave Orrin a small wooden whistle he had carved himself, painstakingly smoothing the edges until they felt soft. Cody, ever practical, presented a hand-stitched pouch for carrying nails and tools, a thoughtful gift, Elara gave him a new coat, dark wool, finely stitched, that had belonged to her late husband, Thomas. It fit Orrin almost exactly. A passing of the mantle, a silent acknowledgement of his growing strength and burgeoning responsibility. "I can't take this," Orrin said quietly, his eyes not quite meeting hers, the weight of the gift too heavy for his young shoulders. "You already have," she replied, her voice gentle but firm, accepting his unspoken burden. He wore it the next morning without another word, a subtle shift in his demeanor. A new sense of belonging settled upon his young shoulders. That was the day everything truly changed. It began with a dog, a lone stray mutt, yellow-eyed and gaunt, its ribs showing through its mangy fur. It limped onto the property just before noon. Pip saw it first through the kitchen window, his small face pressed against the glass, eyes wide with childlike wonder. It was raining again, thin, persistent sheets that blurred the world outside into a watercolor painting. The dog stood near the edge of the tree line, staring intently at the house, a silent, unmoving sentinel. "Dog," Pip whispered, tugging Elara's sleeve. Elara squinted out the window, a knot forming in her stomach, a prickle of unease. "Not a good sign," she murmured, a premonition whispering in the wind. Orrin had already gone outside, drawn by an unseen pull, a hunter's instinct. "Go back inside," she told him through the window, her voice sharp with alarm. But he shook his head, his gaze fixed on the animal, a silent refusal. "I just want to see." Then, abruptly, the dog ran, not toward them, but away, vanishing into the rain-swept woods as if pursued by an unseen force. Just as it disappeared, a chilling sound rang out through the trees, a sound Elara hadn't heard in years, a sound that chilled her to the bone. Gunfire. One shot, then silence, then three more. Orrin, without hesitation, dropped flat to the ground. Cody instinctively pulled Pip from the window, their small bodies pressing against the wall, seeking shelter. Elara didn't move. Her heart pounded loud in her ears, a frantic drum against the sudden, terrifying silence. But her body had gone still, a hunter's stillness. She knew that rhythm, a warning shot, then a real one, then two more to prove it wasn't an accident. Someone was watching, and they were closing in. They didn't sleep that night. Elara made the boys stay in the kitchen, far from the vulnerable windows. The only light, the flickering warmth of the hearth. They ate cold bread and beans, the simple food tasteless in their mouths, swallowed with difficulty. Orrin kept the rifle on his lap the whole time, his jaw tight, his eyes flicking to every dark corner of the room. A young man burdened by a heavy, premature responsibility. He'd grown fast since winter, gaining inches in height. But that night he looked older than any boy his age should have, his face etched with a grim, weary determination. "Do you think they'll come in the dark?" Cody asked, his voice barely a whisper, echoing the profound fear in the room. "No," Elara said, her voice calm, a deliberate effort to project strength she wasn't sure she truly felt. "Cowards don't walk through shadows. They wait for light." So they waited. And the morning brought nothing but a thick, oppressive fog, a blind white shroud over the valley, obscuring vision, adding to the unsettling quiet. Still, they stayed inside. 2 days passed, then 3. By the 4th day, food supplies were dangerously low. "I can go into town," Orrin offered, his voice firm, a desperate plea for action. "I'm faster." Elara shook her head, the wisdom of experience guiding her. "You're a boy. They'll be looking for you. For all of you." He didn't argue. a rare concession for him. Instead, she took the long trail, avoiding the main road, adding 3 hours to each way, relying on her intimate knowledge of the land. When she returned, her face was pale, etched with a new, deeper worry that clung to her like the dust of the trail. "What is it?" Cody asked, sensing the profound shift in her demeanor. "There's a man in town," she said, her voice low, strained. "New. Keeps asking about me. Keeps asking if I live alone. Did you tell anyone anything about the boys?" "I didn't need to," Elara replied, her gaze distant, fixed on some unseen point. "Sheriff already ran him out, but he wasn't working alone. They have connections." That night, under the flickering lamplight, she unpacked a wooden box she hadn't opened in years, its contents heavy with memories. Inside was Thomas's old revolver, cool and heavy in her hand, a familiar comfort and a symbol of past strength. A spare box of ammunition and a brittle, folded map. She unfolded the map across the kitchen table, its creases deep with age, showing forgotten trails and hidden passages. "There's a safe place," she said, her finger tracing a path across the faded parchment. 3 valleys over. A church-run homestead. They help families. If I leave tonight, I can speak with the pastor there by morning. Arrange for safe passage for you all." "You're going alone?" Cody asked, his voice sharp with fear, a palpable tightening in the air. "I need someone to stay and keep you safe if I'm gone more than 2 days," she explained, her gaze fixed on Orin, recognizing his newfound role. But Orin shook his head, his face set in stone, his decision unyielding. "We're not leaving," he said, his voice quiet but absolute, a defiant stand. Elara looked at him, her heart sinking, seeing the raw determination in his young eyes. "If they come," he continued, his voice low, a promise and a threat, "we stay together." That was exactly what Elara was afraid of. She had lost so much, and the thought of losing them, her boys, was unbearable. But he wouldn't back down. He'd learned to fight for what was his, and he wouldn't leave anyone behind again. In the end, she left at dusk, a satchel of dry bread and jerky in a saddlebag, Thomas's revolver strapped to her side, and the desperate, fragile hope that she'd return before anything went wrong. The shadow had indeed fallen over Sunstone Valley, and the peaceful rhythm of their lives was gone, replaced by the relentless thrum of imminent danger. Elara Thorne rode hard through the pre-dawn chill, her breath fogging in the cold, her heart pounding louder than her mare's hooves. She had been less than 10 miles out when the true storm hit. Not a tempest of wind and rain, but a storm of sound distant hoofbeats. Then a sharp, piercing whistle. She immediately veered her mare down a narrow creek bed, hoping for concealment. But they were faster, more numerous. Within an hour, she was surrounded. 3 riders emerged from the swirling mist, men in dust-caked coats, their faces obscured by scarves, guns drawn. Elara didn't flinch, her hand resting on Thomas's revolver. "Where you headed, miss?" the lead rider drawled. "Church," Elara replied, her tone cool, defiant. A cruel smile stretched across his face. "Those 3 boys you've been harboring." "Harboring?" Elara spat. "They were dumped like trash. I gave them a home." The man chuckled. "You stole them from someone who paid good money." "Then maybe the system's broken," she retorted. "Doesn't change the law. Then maybe the law is broken, too," Elara countered. "You're awfully brave. Miss, I've got enough lead to fill all 3 of you," she said, lifting the revolver. "And I've got friends," he said, whistling again. 4 more men stepped from the trees, a stark reinforcement of the overwhelming odds. Elara didn't lower her weapon, but she didn't fire. Instead, she dismounted. "If you take me," she declared, "you'll have to drag me. I'm not walking anywhere with men like you." "You won't need to," the leader said. And then, without warning, he struck her. The blow sent a blinding pain through her head, and she fell, the world swimming before her eyes. Back at the cabin, the boys waited. Days passed in anxious quiet. By the third day, Orrin couldn't sit still. "She wouldn't leave us," he muttered. Cody tried to reason. "She might have gotten stuck," but Orrin shook his head, a cold fire in his eyes. Something happened. He moved decisively to Elara's wooden box, taking the second revolver and the brittle map. "We go after her," he said, his voice flat. Little Pip looked up from his sketching. "I'm coming," he said, his voice steady. Orrin looked at him. "You're not strong enough." "Pip, I don't care," Pip insisted, his chin trembling. "She's my mom." The words hung in the air, a profound declaration that solidified their purpose. They packed the next morning before dawn, taking only what they could carry. They followed Elara's trail, Orrin leading, the revolver holstered at his hip, a weapon too large for a boy not yet 16. Yet he carried it as if it belonged. Cody took the rear, checking over his shoulder every dozen steps. Pip walked between them, his stride small but sure, his small fists balled at his sides, the crude wooden slingshot strapped across his chest. He hadn't spoken since they left, but he hadn't cried either. He'd simply looked at the faint trail of blood in the mud, nodded once, and said, "She's alive." They believed him. Believing otherwise wasn't an option. The hills were cruel, the climb relentless. Vines and thorns clawed at their legs. The air turned thin. Cody found a boot print in the soft earth, a woman's step, weak but recent. Orrin knelt, tracing the indentation, his lips moving. "We're close," he finally said, his voice tight with hope and dread. Real close. The cabin appeared by accident. They were cutting through rocks when Pip grabbed Orrin's sleeve and pointed. Beyond the gnarled trees, through thick overgrowth, sat a weathered shack. Smoke curled faint from the chimney. Alive, a red scarf, torn and familiar, hung from a nail on the porch. "She's there," Pip whispered. "No guarantee." Cody whispered back. "Could be a trap." "We can't wait," Orrin answered. "We go quiet, fast, no noise." They crept forward, each step hushed. The porch boards groaned. Orrin motioned for Pip to stay behind the tree line. Cody followed close, knife drawn. The door was cracked. Orrin pressed his ear to the frame. Nothing. He pushed. The hinges shrieked, and harsh light spilled into a dust-choked room. The smell of old smoke, sweat, and metallic blood filled their noses. A table sat overturned, a chair broken, rope coiled on the ground. "Over here," Cody whispered, pointing to a dark corner. "Elara." She was tied to the bedpost, wrists red and raw, dress torn. Her eyes were open, half-lidded with exhaustion, lips cracked, a cruel bruise beneath one cheekbone. She didn't flinch, didn't cry out, just smiled. A weary, knowing smile. "I knew you'd come," she said, her voice a dry rasp, but filled with unshakable certainty. Orrin was at her side instantly, his hands shaking as he cut through the bindings with the revolver's holster knife. "Did they hurt you?" he asked, his voice tight with rage. "Not in the way they wanted," she replied. Wincing as the ropes fell loose, Cody peered out the window. No sign of them. Elara leaned heavily against Orrin. "They'll be back," she whispered, grim. "They only left to get supplies. There's more. They're not just after me. They're after the boys. Some new buyer." Her words painted a chilling picture. "Orphans like you fetch good coin. especially if you're broken in already. Pip's voice came from the open doorway, sharp and urgent. They're coming. He stood there, holding a rock, eyes wide, fixed on the approaching figures. 3 men, dark shapes against the trees. They had minutes, less. Orrin pulled Elara to her feet. She staggered. I can run, she said. You can lean, he replied, slinging her arm over his shoulder. The escape wasn't clean. The shack's back door led to a steep ravine. Orrin went first, helping Elara slide down. Cody followed. Pip was last. He didn't make it halfway before a shout came from above. There, down the hill. Gunfire tore through the quiet. Cody spun, returning a single defiant shot. 1 man dropped. The others scattered. But not for long. They'll circle, Orrin said. We can't outrun bullets. Elara gritted her teeth. There's a mine shaft. Old, about half a mile east. My husband used to trap there. If it's still standing, it'll buy us time. Then that's where we go, Orrin declared. They ran. The path was rough, slick with red clay from recent rain. Twice, Pip slipped, hauled up by Cody's strong grip. Orrin led like a shadow. Elara leaned heavier with each step, her breath ragged. They reached the mine as storm clouds darkened the sky. The entrance was half collapsed, but the tunnel yawned open. Orrin didn't hesitate. He led them in, lantern swinging, casting weak circles of light. Inside, the air was damp. Old rails rusted. An overturned cart sat. Farther in, Orrin said. We'll find a pocket to hide. Pip tugged his sleeve. What if it caves in? Orrin met his gaze. Then we take the risk, because outside was worse. The echo of boots came less than 10 minutes later. 2 men, then a third, their voices low and angry. I told you I heard him down here. They won't get far. This place is a coffin. Orrin positioned himself at a bend. He handed Elara the revolver. She looked at him, startled. You shoot if they get too close. No questions. I won't let them take you. She nodded. He slipped deeper into the dark. The ambush was fast. Orrin waited until the first man passed, then struck with an iron rail. The man dropped. The second spun, shouting. But Cody tackled him, his knife flashing. The third raised his pistol, then went down with a single deafening gunshot from behind. Elara stood at the tunnel mouth, Thomas's revolver smoking. Her hands shook. I didn't think I would, she whispered. You did, Orrin said, helping her lower the gun. You saved us. We're not safe yet. And they weren't. The last man wasn't dead. He groaned, reaching for his weapon, blood streaming down his cheek. Please, he rasped. I was just doing a job. Orrin looked at Elara. She stepped forward, leaned down, and took his weapon. You tell whoever sent you, she said, her voice firm and cold. If they come near my boys again, I'll put the next one between their eyes. She stood, resolute. We leave him. Let him crawl back. Let him deliver the message. They exited the mine by a side shaft Orrin remembered from the map. It took them twice as long to circle the ridge and reach the base. But by sunset, they were clear of the hills, clear of the blood, the shack, and the terrifying darkness of the mine, exhausted but alive. They started their long journey home, leaving the shadow of danger behind them. For now. Years softened the harsh lines of the Sunstone Valley, and Elara Thorne became more than a widow. She became the heart of the Valley Beacon, her ranch, once a place of quiet grief, transformed into a bustling haven, a warm glow in the often cold expanse of the western frontier, guiding lost souls home. Orrin, Cody, and Pip, the first lights of her new purpose, had shed their fears. growing into men as strong and true as the valley itself. Orin, now a man of quiet authority, was the ranch's unwavering protector. His pale blue eyes, once filled with suspicion, now held deep, watchful wisdom. He trained new arrivals in self-defense and oversaw the defenses that kept the Valley Beacon safe. His hands, once quick to aggression, now shaped lives, building security and guiding those who needed it most. Cody, with his meticulous nature and sharp mind, became the steady anchor of the ranch's operations. He managed the finances, oversaw planting and harvesting, ensuring there was always enough food and warmth for everyone. His quiet humor blossomed into a comforting presence, bringing order and easing fears in the bustling household. He was the silent architect of their stability, building not just a livelihood, but a lasting legacy. And little Pip, who first whispered Elara's name, blossomed into Samuel, though most called him Sam. He became the vibrant heart and soul of the Valley Beacon, a natural storyteller whose voice, once barely a murmur, now filled the evenings with the tales of courage, hope, and the unbreakable bonds of family. He taught the younger children their letters from Elara's old Bible, finding profound meaning in the ancient words. He was the keeper of their shared history, ensuring no one forgot where they came from, or the kindness that had brought them home. His drawings, once crayon smudges, now adorned the walls, depicting their crooked house, stars overhead, and the powerful word, found, a constant reminder of their journey. Elara Thorne, now simply Ma Elara, to the many children who passed through her doors, remained the unwavering heart of the Valley Beacon. She was no longer just a woman who bought 3 orphans. She was a force, a living symbol of hope. She watched new arrivals' children scarred by hunger, fear, and loneliness slowly unfurl, shedding their past like old skin. Ben, the smallest of the last rescued group, still cried in his sleep sometimes. But one evening, he shyly handed Elara a charcoal smudged paper with a single precious word, Mother. Elara kept it close to her heart, a silent testament to the quiet miracles she witnessed daily. They're healing, she murmured to Orin one night. He nodded. So are we. The house, once too quiet, now buzzed with laughter, bickering, and singing. Orin taught fishing. Cody carved wooden toys, and Elara expanded the garden. When an official offer came years later to formalize the Valley Beacon's mission, Elara looked out at her boys, her men now teaching the newest arrivals. She didn't need to consider it long. I already did, she thought, her heart swelling with purpose. The tree they planted where the mine had been still stood, taller now, thick with leaves and white blossoms, a yearly reminder of new beginnings. Under its shade, a small marker read, "For the ones who never made it and the ones who did." The house itself had grown, laughter spilling from every room, children of all ages finding refuge. Elara never turned anyone away, and in time, people began calling it the Boon Light, because that's what it became, a light for the boys buried in silence, for the ones told they weren't worth keeping, for the ones digging their own graves, until a quiet widow with a fierce heart said, "You don't have to." And for Elara Thorne, who lost everything and gave everything, finding life by giving it to others, her spirit, like the Sunstone Valley itself, forever transformed into a beacon of hope. The western skies still grumbled, and lightning flashed across the distant hills, but within the warm, secure walls of the Boon Light, no one was afraid of the storm. They were simply, profoundly home.